Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Off the Clock podcast with Rick Gorman and Scott Chandler. We're excited for episode number 3. We have a really good topic tonight that we'll get into. But first, Scott, welcome back. And how was that trip down south? Why don't you let our listeners know?
Yeah, well, I did my Kevin McCarthy, and I went down south. We made numerous stops. We stopped at our first stop was New Hope, Pennsylvania. And do you know what's relevant about New Hope, Pennsylvania?
I do not.
You know the band Ween?
I do.
That's where they formed.
Wow.
That's where they originated. We didn't run into G. Ween or any of the fellow band mates, but it was a good spot, great spot. So right on the Delaware River, I did my best George Washington impression and tried to cross the river, but it was great spot.
Right.
Then from there we went to Richmond, which I talked about last week, in Virginia, and got to go to that Vale Brewery, and the beer was excellent. And from there we went to my niece's daughter's birthday party, 2-year-old birthday party. And that was great. And then we went to my son's down in Charleston. So we had a real good time. On the way back, we went to Williamsburg, and we went to Pennsylvania again. And from Pennsylvania to New York City on the way home, it was pouring rain. It was like the worst drive I ever had. And that was just this weekend where Memorial Day weekend turned into kind of a mess. So, and then we're home. So
yeah, I know driving with you. You're what I call a very stressful driver, and you will deny that. But I've been in there. I know just even driving over to Swampscott on a Saturday, you were very stressed going through stop signs and things like that. So I can imagine that trip back was challenging. I hope the wife had the headphones on.
Yeah, I'm not going to say stressful. I'm going to say emotional driver. Yep, if you're in the highway and somebody cuts you off, or you're behind a truck and it's spraying water and you're trying to pass it and he speeds up when you pass him, that's aggravating.
So have you always been an emotional driver? I mean, you used to have to commute into Boston. I'm sure that was challenging, or is this an age-related thing?
Yeah, my wife thinks it's age-related, although she's always said I've been a little bit of an emotional driver. So, and I think that comes from commuting into Boston for probably 30 years.
Really?
So, yep.
And I'm thinking back when you were probably in your 30s or 40, a little rage at times on a Friday coming out of Boston?
I wouldn't say rage, but man, some of the traffic was insane. And later in my career, I was coming from Quincy. So you would have to go through the tunnel, then you'd have to, and it could be a 2-hour commute. And you just want to get home at that point.
Yeah.
So.
And now you just have a quick commute over to the YMCA every day.
That's 4.5 miles, but some days I can get backed up right by Burger King. Look out, it's not great. Yeah.
That is stressful.
Yeah, it's very stressful.
All right, glad you. Did you want to add anything else to that?
I just say I try to plan my workout so it doesn't get too backed up going to that intersection on Burger King. So yeah,
unbelievable. Well, glad you had a great time. Glad
Thanks.
you saw some different sights, and now you're back in the studio here, ready to go for episode number 3.
Here we go.
So for our listeners, we've had 2 really good episodes. Thanks for the continuous feedback, and please continue to send us feedback, good, bad, and the ugly, so we can just get better at this every week. So episode 3, we're titling this one, Navigating the First Year of Retirement. And leading into this, I've been doing a lot of conversations, I guess I'll call it, around and talking directly to people that have retired. And I focused on 3 groups. Groups that have been retired only up to a year, which I fall into that category. And then the second category were people that, years 1 and 2. And then the third category, which was really interesting, people that have been retired for many years. And it's interesting to hear a lot of their comments. I had a lot of questions for them. There was a lot of similarities, a lot of differences too. So let's just delve in this right away. And I think you are a good person to talk about this because you are in, I don't know, what I want to call it, 18 months or whatever of retirement right now. So why don't we start off with you in terms of what was the first year like?
Yeah, I mean, and I alluded to this a little bit last week, but the first few months are like at the honeymoon phase. I mean, I felt like you didn't have to go to meetings, you didn't have to go and listen to, go into a meeting and listen to people say all the business terms like blockchain or whatever it is. So that was great. You could get up when you want. Not that I ever sleep in much, but you could pretty much do what you want, and that's a new feeling. Like I could work out. I didn't have to look at the clock and say, "Geez, I have to be back for a 1 o'clock meeting. I have to wrap this workout in by 12:30." And that, to me, that was a great feeling. That was awesome. And as you know, I value working out very much. So it was a great experience to not have to worry about that time crunch. That was really kind of relaxing. So and then I think after the honeymoon phase is over, and like I said, for the first
So how
month,
long is the honeymoon phase?
that's a good question. I mean, some of those feelings still haven't left me. Like when I go to the gym, I still really enjoy the gym and not have to worry about the clock. I can just work out when I want to work out. If I come home and get into my fantasy sport thing, I don't have to look at the clock and say what time it is. I can do it for as long as I want. I can pick up a book and read the book. I can watch a movie. So there are so many things I can do that I don't have to worry about the time. And that feeling after 40 years of that still is, to me, is is a great feeling. And I know some people probably struggle with that, right? But for some reason, it just kind of works for me. And I don't know exactly why. And I think a couple of advantages is that my wife is also retired, and she was retired for maybe 4 or 5 years before I retired. She retired during COVID. So I think that kind of helped my adjustment because I had somebody to do things with. Not all my friends were retired yet or are retired now. And we would do things together, but we would also have our own time. We would cut out our own time. And I think we both have hobbies. She likes to do a bunch of stuff. I mean, cook and puzzles and a lot of things. And I have my hobbies, and I think it's important to have a hobby. It's important to really enjoy something that consumes a decent amount of time. And we both volunteer. We both ended up volunteering within that first 6-month time frame. And that was rewarding, too, because it gives you that sense of purpose. So you go through the honeymoon phase, then I think you kind of assess your purpose. And, what does this transition mean? What has it turned into? And for me, it had a little bit of everything. I could be there more for my family. I could, in terms of seeing the grandkids, spending time with the family, spending time with people you really care about, my aunt. So, that was great. For me, it wasn't a bad transition at all. So that's
I would push back on one thing you said, living through you, I guess, during that period of time is you would often say to me in the first 6 to 8 months that you really needed to find something, that you didn't know what you wanted to do. So that purpose or whatever it is, whether it be a volunteer initiative or whatever, that was a bit of a challenge for me. That didn't happen overnight. As a matter of fact, you were struggling with like, what do I do? What am I going to be good at? That type of thing. So at what point in the first year did you get to the point where you found out what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so and that's a good question because I feel like I'm still assessing purpose, right? Like what is my purpose? And again, I volunteer for a hospice, and that serves I think a good outlet to give back a little bit, to have some purpose, assuming you're helping the person that you think you're helping, which I think I am and was. So I feel like that's a good spot to kind of be in. In terms of other things that my family, like I assess my relationships with them and how often I spend time with them. Like I said before, that's important to me. And now the purpose for my family is always forefront.
Yeah. And you've actually found your niche with that. And obviously family has always been top notch for you. So in talking to a lot of people, I actually felt comfortable in feeling like I wasn't totally alone was this massive roller coaster of emotions. And for me, it's now been over 3 months, is that I have roller coaster emotions. There are days that I really like having a lot of unstructured free time. I will echo to you, it was obviously, having my own personal gym, so to speak, at my work. But I was always running, like, can I work out? How much time do I have work out? Now that is entirely different. I can go and work out and not have to look at the clock or whatever. But I struggle with, there are times that, quite frankly, I'm probably bored. Going to need to find a little bit more So the roller coaster is I like being retired. I like the time. No, I wish I was a little busier. I wish I had a little more of a focus. And for me, that roller coaster emotion, tends to be is in my job. I had a very mentioned it a number of times on this podcast. 7 days a week, going 90 miles an hour, and I think for me, it's not. I don't really miss that, but I was involved with some huge decision making, and to be almost irrelevant, and now in making these kind of decisions, and I always, people always said to me, "Oh, when you retire, you'll be forgotten in a lot of ways." And I'm like, how's that going to happen? But in reality, it is. So a lot of people talk to me about the roller coaster of emotions. Do I want to be retired? Do I like being retired? How am I going to fill my time? You never really had those roller coaster emotions?
I really didn't. I feel like, I mean, I want to go back to something you just said. At times you say you feel a little bored, and at times last week you said you feel a little lonely. Like, what are the difference for those feelings? Like, what's the difference between your feeling of boredom and your feeling of loneliness? How do you mesh the two?
Yeah, it's tough because I look at them as two different things. Boredom being more the fact that I'm used to, constantly in movement, whether it be working on a project or doing research on something or, just grinding, so to speak. The loneliness piece is, and it was really with our topic that we talked about, is loneliness is, to a certain degree, I love my personal time. I definitely don't want to give that up. But there are some times where you sit there and you go, whoa, I'm kind of a little by myself on a few things, and that can be tough. It's not that you don't work through. It's a new day. It's a new, like, how are you going to navigate that is probably the bigger thing. Do I sit there and say that I'm flat out lonely? No, and I don't really think that's the case. It's, one thing I was in my previous life was never had really time to be lonely, and I think that's a little bit different. And the other thing is that, you and I, it's interesting. I talk to some people that fall more into my bucket, and then I talk to people that fall more into your bucket. And, I don't have grandchildren. You spend a lot of time with your grandchildren, love your grandchildren, totally understand that, and spend a lot of time with that. So if I don't have that as a possible thing, that's probably something I'm missing out right now. I'm sure at some point in time I will. But yeah, so I think it's two different things in terms of loneliness as well as being bored. Bored is I can get bored pretty easily on things if it doesn't stymie my brain or it doesn't make me be passionate or whatever. I want to move on to the next thing. But with it said is I tend to start I'm working on some projects myself, a couple of writing projects that when I'm feeling either bored or slightly lonely, I put my emphasis into that.
Yeah, and again, I think everybody feels a little lonely and a little bored sometimes, right? I don't mean to be exempt from that when I say I'm never bored, I'm never lonely. But I would say in general, I'm not like yourself. I have enough outlets where I feel like that's not the case. But I think it's important to make sure that again you have a hobby, that you can get something that you're passionate about and delve into it. For me, it's sports. As I know you're a big sports guy too. We talk about it a lot. It's fantasy football, basketball, baseball, all that stuff. I really enjoy that, and I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't matter what it is. Whether it be gardening, doing a puzzle. I mean, there are a ton of outlets out there, right? That can fill in some of those gaps. I think sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing some share of yard work now and stuff, which is something that I really thrive on. It is interesting for someone who grew up in sports his whole life and being important. Sports are not as important to me as it once was, and I actually like that. Obviously, I'm a huge San Antonio Spurs fan, so I'm loving that series. But if you ask me anything about the New York Knicks Cavs series, I don't even know if I watched even a minute of it. And there's just other things that I want to do. I don't want to just delve into sports on that piece. But, finding that niche is extremely important. I think for both of us, we kind of walk a little bit in different lanes on this. A lot of people were talking about, to me, like they had a lot of fears of the unknown. And I actually can relate to that. So the unknown being like, okay, this is a chapter. There's not a real book on it. I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do some research on. But at the end of the day this is you're stepping into new waters here. It sounds to me like for you, there wasn't a lot of fears of the unknown.
There weren't a lot of fears, but I would also expect the unexpected. Like when when I gave my notice at work that I was retiring, there was about a 6-month gap, or I forget what it was, 9-month gap, whatever it was. And during that time frame, my son, who lived and his daughter-in-law and my 2 grandsons lived 3 miles down the street from me. Went over there all the time, play catch with them. We would do whatever, right? Then he decided to move to South Carolina, and I go, oh wow. And, in my head, I was planning on taking him to practice, going to practice, whatever it was, right? My other grandson is musical, taking him to flute lessons or whatever it was. Once they decided they were moving, I was like, oh boy, that's half my retirement plan down the drain. What am I going to do? So, sometimes expect the unexpected, because that happens. You just kind of have to roll with it and find the next thing. But that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, and I think you got to roll with it and can't shy away from, the challenge of what you want to do, what you can do. I think in my case is I do have some projects that I really have always said I was going to do. Write a book, write some periodicals on some different subject matters, which I think I have a lot to give. Obviously, you got your fantasy basketball and stuff. I tend to, like to have some discussions on social media about different subject matters. I'm pretty opinionated on different things, so that fills the void with that too. One person said to me, and this is something I think is probably something I've questioned. Well, let me go back to the fact that, I think people need to really know each other. And I think one of my positives and negatives at the same time is I know myself more than at times I really want to know myself. I take a deep personal dive into how I'm feeling, what makes me tick, what doesn't make me tick. Probably a lot of stuff in my mind that's got me drained to a certain degree. So that can be hugely positive. I think I'm a self-aware person. I get myself. But the same thing is it can also be something that tortures you too. So where are you in that area?
I just want to say the book you've been writing, I think you've been writing that for 20 years. That's the longest. That's the longest book I think that's ever been written. How many?
Should be pretty good when it comes out, though.
How many chapters?
It's not really the chapters. It's more around I've got like 3 writing projects that I'm doing, and I do a little bit on each one of them. The book you're talking about is something I was extremely passionate about, and you were too, as I did a lot of research on what's wrong with youth sports and everything else. I spent a lot of research time, got lots of notes. Really haven't done too much with that. More so for me is writing about leadership, how to build a nonprofit like what I've done. And then, you always laugh about it, but I'm quite the little bit of a poet, so I'd like to do a lot of writings on life and failings and things like that. So the book that you're looking for, I don't even know if that'll ever be written, but I know the other things will be written, and I like to spend some time with that. And becoming a little bit of an aficionado on AI right now. So that's going to help me with some of these projects and everything else. So,
Now,
thanks for bringing that up.
Are you looking to publish it? Seriously, at some point? Okay.
Took a class at Northern Essex probably 3 years ago on how to self-publish. It's a lot easier than back when I was a young guy and you had to try to sell it to Random House or something like that, a publishing company. I would like to do it. Now, will anybody buy it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to actually, publish something that means important to me, and maybe it'll be a hit someday, and my kids will end up getting the royalties from it.
There we go. I'll buy a copy.
Thanks.
You're
Appreciate that. So, yeah, so, something else that someone said in the first year was a little bit of fear. Like we talked about the fears of the unknown, but one person in particular was talking about being afraid of living a boring and simple life. And you've talked a little bit in the first couple episodes about that, you kind of poo-poo yourself a little bit, but you basically say, hey, I like my life. It's kind of a simple life. It's maybe not for everybody. But when you think about this person's comment around being afraid of being boring and having a simple life, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I had to open my mind more than I usually do when I went into retirement, right? So when somebody wants to do something, I seldomly say no anymore. If somebody, where in the past I would have said, I don't feel like doing that, I don't want to do that, but now I will take the opportunity to at least try things out, see if I like it, see if I don't like it. An example of this, and I've talked about this before, is the bowling league. So I know it sounds silly, but I joined a co-ed bowling league, and I bowled when I was younger. I'm not a good bowler, I'm not a bad bowler, I'm kind of in the middle. And it was actually fun. And again, it took up some time. It was a social event. It introduced me to some people I never would have met in a million years. And like I said last week, I'm not going out with these people, but I really enjoyed their company for what it was. And I'm toying with that. Will I pursue it again next year? I may not. So we'll see how that goes. But the point being, if somebody calls me up and says, hey, you want to do something, you want to go for a hike, you want to go grab a beer, in the past, if I didn't feel like it, I would say no. Now I'm much more open to say, I'll try. Yeah, let's go. I'll give it a shot, and that's been a good way of learning and meeting some new people from a social perspective, and I think that's really benefited me in the first year of retirement. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that you've gotten a lot better on that. Prior to retirement, you had we always joke about your regimented life schedule, and I think you said no more than you said yes to a lot of different things because there were other things that were more important, whether it be family or, with your partner, et cetera, et cetera. I think you are open to that a little bit more, but I think you still have some fear. Our good friend Waterboy and I were talking about this, that we were planning, I don't know if you remember this, we were planning a big climb of Mount Katahdin, and you were very comfortable with it being me, you, and Waterboy climbing it, and John said, I'd like to bring a couple of people from the church. And man, your reaction, I can remember it clearly. It was like, why would we go with? I don't want to go with people I don't know. Has that changed?
Was that my voice you just mimicked?
No, it's not hard to mimic your voice.
Yeah. No, in fact, my reaction was, I'm not going. I didn't say.
Oh, you flat out said you weren't going.
Yeah, I said I'm not going, and I think I had good reason for that, right? Because going with the two of you, we can talk about anything, and we can really we can dive into deep stuff. We can talk about life. We can talk about stuff you wouldn't talk about in front of strangers. We talked about this a little last week. I don't want to go on a hike up Mount Katahdin with two guys I don't know and tell them my deepest, darkest secrets about death. I mean, I just don't. So, and you guys gave me a lot of grief for that. But it changes to me. It changes the dynamic of the whole outing. So,
well, I think you're over-evaluating that we would have deep, dark secrets as we climbed Mount Katahdin.
Not
right?
deep, dark secrets, but
in the same breath, and we talked about this in episode 2, is like, I can have life conversations with a stranger, and that's, I think, is uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
And I do. And, like, it was funny because it was probably about a month ago, we were sitting at a bar reliving this situation with you because you are a little bit the other way on that. So Waterboy and I were talking about, we went to Neil Young, and your good friend Jimmy Scranton came with it. And I love Jimmy. Jimmy worked for me, but I hadn't seen Jimmy in freaking 15, 20 years or whatever. And, I could have looked at that dynamic and said, well, I'll go to Neil Young with you, but like Jimmy, I don't know if the experience. But you were like, and then John Burnett, who didn't even know Jimmy, so I'm saying you can't have it both ways.
But you knew Jimmy.
I knew Jimmy, but I knew Jimmy 20 years ago, and he worked for me for a year. So it's not like I knew Jimmy like you did.
Yeah.
And Waterboy didn't know Jimmy at all. Yeah. All I'm saying is there's two sides to that.
And I did cave a little on that. I did say you have a decent point. You have a decent point.
But at this point in life, why is it so hard? I still think you get stuck with this. If I'm going to have I don't even know how many conversations we've had that have been really, really totally intense, which you wouldn't want to talk about anybody else. It's just like climbing Mount Katahdin with some people we just met. Why can't you look at that actually might be fun?
Yeah. I just don't want to do it. I mean, I don't have and I've thought about it a lot. I don't have a really good reason. I can't sit here and say, okay, this is going to logically make sense to people. But I can sit there and say, I want to do social things, and especially for staying overnight somewhere. I value that time, right? And I want to make sure I optimize that time. And to me, to optimize that is to be with people you know and like, and not introduce somebody who might mess things up or mess up the chemistry or start complaining about something. I know none of us are going to complain. Whether it rains, whether it's, we're all going to be in it together. We'll make some jokes. We'll laugh. If you have two people you don't know, it just change. It could change the whole dynamic, and that would stink.
Okay, all right. I mean, we have to agree to disagree on that, right?
And we always have.
Yeah.
And Waterboy gives me a harder time than you do about that.
Yeah. Well, I think you are extremely stuck in your ways, and that's not being judged. But I think where I started with this, though, is I do see a little crack in that with you. I think that you're changing a tad. And the Katahdin story was an extreme one, but I do think that you'd be more, because the reality is you've had conversations with me offline about what that co-ed bowling group really is all about. And, probably 5 years ago, and you might not have been caught dead with most of those people. But now you're like, they're actually okay. I don't want to go for a beer with them, but they're okay to go bowling with.
Yeah, and it's not the people. It's not the people per se. It's new people. It's having to learn about people and introduce yourself.
Oh my God, that's scary.
It's scary. Imagine if I go in a nursing home. That's not going to be good. It's going to be. I'm going to be like a kid in high school in the new kid in the cafeteria.
So we talk about this even before we retired. I don't get that. I embrace getting to know new people. I embrace. Just in my last couple of years, I've met a lot of different people that I just like kind of sitting and talking to them, and they're different than me, and they got different takes on me, but I get some enjoyment with that. Let's jump forward here. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and I just want so give an example of somebody that you just met that you're close to now, because I can't think of anybody that's happened. Do you just mean talking to them randomly at a restaurant?
Oh, I mean, there's a guy up in Maine that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. Have we socialized with him? Yes. I was doing some work up there, and I bumped. I actually went to his house, sat down, and talked to him for a while. Now, where he's older than me. He's actually someone that I think has a lot more life experience than me, and I was actually kind of picking his brain. He was asking me about retirement, I love talking to him. And if you saw me and him together, I know you would have a wisecrack with that. I enjoy, and when I run into him, I enjoy talking to him. And that's a guy I didn't know 2 years ago. That's all I'm trying to say is that I embrace new people. You and I fight about this a little bit, is that I think you're real comfortable with your existing people, and I am too, but I am open to new experiences. And I think we limit ourselves when we don't go down that road on that.
Yeah, so. and again, I can't argue that, right? And I go back to what I said initially, and I am trying to say no less.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a pretty good job with that, as long as it doesn't affect your workout schedule at the YMCA.
Or setting my fantasy lineup for the day.
Yeah, for sure. So we touched on this in episode 2 around trying to stay connected with different interests, and I mentioned that band Less Than Zero, which I'll just repeat, it was good music. I enjoyed it. It was a good Saturday night. But what I took out of it was that these guys all enjoyed playing together. And we enjoyed that at one point in time with the Mighty Wildcats. And the reality here is we have now stopped playing on 10 years now, and we played for, this existing group played for 2 decades before that. Waterboy and I, it was almost 3 decades. And we've trying to find that niche on that. And for us, the Wildcats don't play basketball anymore, but we try to find a niche on a social piece on that. So what do you have to say on, like, trying to continue some interest levels that we had when we weren't retired in retirement life?
Yeah, so and I thought about that too. With the Wildcats, the guys we played basketball with, it would be nice if we had an activity that we all did on a weekly basis, if nothing else, so we could go out and have beers later and laugh and talk. And
pickleball was mentioned, and it was poo-pooed.
Yeah, I don't know. Pickleball, I mean...
I know you've read the research on Achilles injuries.
Yeah, I'm not... I mean, I would play pickleball, but I don't think I'm the only one in that group that would question playing pickleball.
Oh no, most people push back on it. I just threw it out as a suggestion because, to your point, I'm not a big card player, but I could be convinced to get that connection. Because remember, our playing basketball, we love the game. We were very competitive, but we love the post game. We always called it the post game. We love the jokes. We love the laughs. So I'm looking to see how we can bring that back. And pickleball was an example. I mean, if you remember, a couple of times we got together and played beach volleyball. I mean, there were some things that we can do in finding that. Because when I looked at that less than zero band, I saw 5 guys that have a connection with music, that really enjoy playing with each other, and they're going to do that a lot longer than we're going to play basketball.
Yeah, and I feel like getting that group together would have so many benefits, right? I think we all kind of get along, and again, there's always dynamics where not everybody's going to be best friends, but you have a good time collectively. Yeah. And it's too bad we can't capture that in some way, shape, or form. And if we were creative enough, I'm sure we could come up with something. But also, a lot of people are still working in that group, so schedules become an issue too.
See, I think that's a cop-out though, because I think in a lot of ways we played basketball. It used to be like twice a week, but it was once a week, and it was after everybody was home, so you could still do something like that. So when I say I push back on this, is like, why are we giving up on the idea? Let's find the other niche. And I think, we do have a difference of age groups or whatever, but I think, the Wildcats are probably some of our bigger listeners here. They would love the aspect that we could get together and do that. We have our annual NCAA Day every year, and it's a big hit. We see a lot of guys we don't see all year. And then we have our own times that we get together with smaller groups or whatever. But to me, when I mentioned pickleball, and by the way, I'm not a big proponent of pickleball. First of all, I think it's a cult.
I'm not against it. I'm not against pickleball.
I'm just like, that would be something that can almost kind of recreate that competitive piece a little bit. And then, we go out and have a drink afterwards. So it's something on that. And I think when I was talking to people that was in that 12-month to the second year of retirement, they did talk about, like, what is your niches, whether it be a book club or whether it be, I'm going to get together and we're going to once a month, we're going to go hike or something like that. And I just think that's important.
So why haven't we ever started a book club? A book club's a great idea.
Yeah, you and I talked about it. Yeah. I think part of it was, who do we know that actually would want to? I mean, I've considered even asking. I mean, females tend to have more book clubs than males in my world, and I was almost like, how do I break into that? I don't know if it's just a gender-specific book club, but I mean, I would get a kick out of being a book club because, one, I'm reading them a lot more now. I do like to discuss books, and I like to obviously hear what people are reading. So. Yeah,
my wife had a book club where I forget I wish I could remember what the book was, but they all had to dress up like a character.
Really?
And that's so not me. I'm like, really? That's not, you're going to do that? And she goes, yeah, it's going to be a blast. And I'm like, okay, to each their own. And she just,
yeah, because you would never do that.
She just looked at me and shook her head. Right. And she's like, yeah, come on, have some fun in life.
So in the second group that I'm calling the second group with the need for do something, work, and volunteer, when did you basically put down stakes that you were going to do this? And actually, you had to go through some training and everything else to do the hospice work. At what point were you in your mind, you were like, I got to stop talking about this. I got to do something.
And that's exactly kind of what triggered it, right? So I was sitting around saying, and again, it's that assessment phase. what am I doing with my life? I got to do something positive. I got to give back, and giving back's a weird term, but I have to be proactive somehow. So I decided to go through the hospice training, which is quite entailed. It's pretty intense, and it takes up a lot of time. And again, it's a lot of Zoom meetings, and you have to talk about your feelings, which I love. So that was a little intense for me, but it was rewarding. At the end of it, okay, I went through it. I was glad I went through it. Then you get a list of patients you can sign up to see that are asking for company. So and it was great. It was very rewarding. But it happened about the 6-month phase when I went through that assessment period and said, what am I really doing? I just can't work out, come back, read the newspaper in the bathtub, do my fantasy sports, and read a book, and then go out for a beer. I mean,
Right.
but sadly, to me, that's not a bad life. That I'm okay with most of that, but I still have to give back. And, I'll give, again, as I mentioned before, my family's real important to me. So I'll spend a lot of time with, my daughter and grandson and son-in-law in Arlington. In fact, they were over the house yesterday, and it's just great to be able to spend that time.
Yeah, and I get it, and you're really good with that, with your family on that. Some of the stuff in your life, and you and I have talked about this offline, scares the crap out of me, and it scares the crap out of me that. And again, trying not to be judgmental, it's just differences that we have. Is when I hear you, you get your workout schedule, you got to do your fantasy, you got to sit in the tub and read. That to me. And again, no offense, sounds boring to me. And I don't know if that's going to meet my needs. And that's why finding something to do is extremely important. I've delved into a couple of things. I think I mentioned it, which is very unlike me, is to be a friendly visitor to a senior. Different than the hospice work that you did, but maybe just someone that it's in a retirement community where I can go over and, be a friendly visitor, check and have conversations. I'm not going to know the person, so it might scare you, but I would actually. You did it. You did it with the hospice work.
I didn't know the hospice guy when I started.
And then the other thing I've been delving a lot into is something that I think I would be really good as. I'm looking to be an instructor at like a community college, and I'm researching some stuff right now, brushing up the resume. I'd like to teach a class. I think a lot of educational institutions are looking for instructors, not exactly professors, but someone that can bring a lot of their expertise. I think I would really like that. Plus, college-age kids is something I think would be a great interest to me. So finding that niche is what I felt a lot of people felt in their feedback to me, is that 12 months to the second year, that was definitely something they definitely needed to do on that. Do you feel like that you've found your new norm now?
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to add to that is traveling, right? Because, you make it sound like I work out, I take a bath, and then I read, and then I do my sports stuff, then I go to bed.
Then you travel.
And we have traveled a lot more, and traveling has been I really enjoy it, right? And I didn't think I was
when you
going
have to drive.
Yeah, but I'm fine. I'm actually fine driving. It's just it almost takes up. It's weird because driving down the New Jersey Turnpike isn't fun, but it seems to go by fast. Like whether we're driving to Pennsylvania, whether we're driving to Washington D.C., whatever it is, and that's very congested area. It's painful to drive through during rush hour. You have to allot.
What's your blood pressure during that period of time?
I don't know. Maybe I'll bring a cuff next time and just wear it all the way down and see what the average is. So, I don't know. I made it, and I was never lightheaded. I didn't. Yeah, so it was great. But traveling has been awesome, and I enjoy seeing different parts of the country, like we talked about last week. And I think we're going to expand that. I haven't talked to my wife about this yet, but I hope to expand it. So maybe we go to West Virginia and see the mountains. Maybe we go to Tennessee and drive. And every once in a while we fly too, right? But I enjoy seeing things, and I'm a history guy. So going to Williamsburg was awesome. So that's and planning out those trips are fun. Like my wife and I sat down and said, okay, and we did some research, and we said, okay, we're going to stop 3 times on the way down to South Carolina, twice on the way back. Where should we stop? What areas interest us? And she would pick out some things that interest her. I would pick out some things that interest me. and we found a happy medium between the two. And that was fun. And we plan on doing more of that. And just planning that is fun. So, and that's something you really can't. And we can go in the car anytime we want, which, again, that's a good feeling to me.
Right.
Yeah.
To my Wildcat listeners out there, can you imagine Scott in traffic on the Jersey Turnpike? You guys have all seen that face when we played basketball and the stress. So you can only imagine on that. Listen, we are flowing through this, so I want to get to kind of the third group I talked to, and these are people that have been retired for a number of years, some actually over a decade. And one of the things they talk a lot about is getting comfortable with the new you. What does that mean to you?
Well, we're not there yet, right? So we can't look into the future and know how we're going to think 5 years from now. But I don't think it is a new me. I think it's the same me adjusting to a different lifestyle, or not really a lifestyle, but with less commitment. Without the work stress, without the having to be at a certain place at a certain time. So I think, and again, we've gone through this, but I think I've adjusted fine, and I don't feel like there's a new me. I feel like I have to adjust me to my new environment, and I feel like I've done that successfully. And again, success is objective, so it's subjective. So it is what it is, and
Right.
and to me, I've adapted myself to that, at least to this point. Maybe a year from now, I'll say, geez, I'm not so sure about this. But I think the one feeling I do have at this point, if anything, is I wish I retired earlier. I feel like, you only have so many healthy years, great years, the famous go, slow go, no go, saying that everybody knows. I wish I had taken advantage and traveled more or done some more stuff and maybe retired 2 years earlier.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm hearing that from a lot of people. And we're going to do a separate episode about that piece, because I think healthy years versus the number of years you have left is something that we got to do more of a deep dive into that. Let me just throw out a couple of the comments, because you're not in this group of people. Basically being comfortable with being the new you, finally coming to grips with the boredom, which I found pretty interesting, of what they term boredom, understanding a simpler life as they aging. Most of them basically were very non-judgmental in the fact, like, hey, everybody's different, everybody embraces this differently, and that we need to support them. And then one thing they talked a lot about, which kind of hits home with me, is the people that have had the hardest adjustments are the ones that have been defined by what they created in their professional life. And that's something that, I think I'll always struggle with it. I've had a lot of good conversations around the fact that I think I'm handling this better than I thought I was going to handle. But in the same breath, you become irrelevant pretty quick, and that's tough for people. So, it's really good I encourage people that are going into retirement. I think of our guy John, who's going to be retiring next month, to talk to as many people. I'm tending to talk to more people that are just longer retired than me, just trying to figure out everything that works for them, that works for me. Some of these people just have great ideas, great thoughts. They even speak calmer. Life is a little slower for them, and I'm getting a heck of a lot out of that. So I do believe we'll touch on this topic probably many times in the podcast, this whole adjustment period. But I think this was really good, talking specifically that first 6 months up until the 12 months on that. So anything you want to finish with on that subject?
not really. I think we're good there, but at some point I think we do dive into, the healthy, health span versus lifespan type
Healthspan
issues.
versus lifespan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that'd be interesting. Yeah.
All right. So again, I know there's a couple of people that don't like the brewery review, but we're running at 98% of our listeners love the brewery review. I did get in touch with you that somebody said, why the heck would I want to know about a brewery in Richmond, Virginia or whatever? So I did ask you to go a little local. So what are we highlighting this week?
Yeah, I'll push back on that though. I think the caveat there last week was you kind of threw it to me in the last minute. You said, "Hey, you got to do your brewery review." I said, "Oh boy."
I have text lists that go back that says you got plenty of notice on that, but go ahead.
But I'll tell you, the Veil, I love Veil, and I reviewed that last week, and it met expectations. expectations. It exceeded expectations. It was great. All right, I'll do a quick one this week on Oak and Iron, which a lot of people probably know out there. I think their beer is solid. It's not high class. It's not True North. It's certainly not like Treehouse or Hill Farmstead, whatever it is. It's not that level at all. But the brewery itself is really kind of cool. If you haven't been there, it kind of sits. If you sit outside, you sit along the river, and you see some old mill buildings, dilapidated mill buildings, but you see some mill buildings in the background. It's kind of a cool environment. In terms of their beer, I had two of them. I had the New England Project IPA, which I thought was solid. It was a really good IPA. But again, it's not going to blow you away, but it's solid. The other one was Riverbender, which is a West Coast IPA, which is really good. And they had a variety of other beers. They had a Kolsch, they had a Pilsner. To me, it was a good spot. They were extremely friendly there. They served food. I think dogs are allowed out in the patio, so it's good. If you're a dog owner, it's a good place to hang. It's a good place to go, I think, for a beer after work, except they're only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I think. So if I had to give it, I would give the beer probably 3.75. I would give the venue like 4.3. The venue, I really liked the spot. I was surprised at how much I liked it. And again, they were very friendly. You ask them for suggestions, very accommodating. Some places you go, they'll kind of give you a weird look. Like, what do you suggest for a beer? And I'll tell them what kind I like. And some people, like I was at Vail, they weren't good at that. The guy goes, I don't know, you choose one. I go, okay. So I just chose one, and it ended up being great. But the guy didn't help me out at all. This place, I feel like they're very accommodating that way. So.
Scott Chandler with the Dave Portnoy evaluation there on the site and everything else. So check that out. Scotty will be adding a brewery every week. I wanted to add something as we continue this navigation into retirement is I'm going to periodically talk about some different things that maybe people can do. And this is something more that I delved into a lot before I was retired, but now I got a big interest. It is especially in our area here of the Merrimack Valley, southern New Hampshire, out to central Mass, is rail trails. And rail trails are not only very cool, but they are something that's got some historical basis to it, whatever. So I've been, last week, spent a lot of time on the rail trail. That's just basically pretty much our closest here starts in Lawrence, and it basically goes through Methuen into Salem, New Hampshire, and I was able to walk it all the way up to Derry, New Hampshire, and I'm going to basically get all the way to Concord, New Hampshire at some point in time. But, a mix of gravel, some dirt paths, but a lot of really hot top areas, so it's an easy walk for people that are retired, maybe some people that got some physical issues or whatever, but, and all along the line, there's different signage about some history stuff about the rail trail, which is pretty cool. So, and then I delved into a part of the Nashua one on last Saturday. So good stuff on some of the rail trails. And what I do want to delve into is now that we're retired and most of us are senior citizens, a lot of benefits through the trustees of the reservation, both on a social aspect. You've been to a couple where, you've been to a couple of brew fests or whatever, and but then there's a lot of different trustees' properties that are really pretty cool to see at a very cheap price, and we'll delve into that a little bit too. So I think this was good on episode number 3. We're going to really stress we love your feedback, and again, I'm not ridiculously have an ego here. We've gotten some negative feedback. We've gotten some, you might want to take a look at this, and we've gotten obviously some great feedback, but we are new at doing this together, and I think the topic is something that I think is needed. I've found a lot of people that are heading towards retirement, checking it out, and I'm really trying to go after a lot of the people that are retired because, one, we can kind of help them, and they can help us because we can always learn some stuff. So great job with that. Get in touch with us. through email, text, or if you just see me on the street, because I am doing my Andrew McCarthy. By the way, his name was not Kevin McCarthy. It was Andrew McCarthy.
Yeah, Kevin sounded
Kevin
better for some
McCarthy
reason.
was a teacher at the north end of a middle school and soccer coach.
I think that's who I think
Yeah.
last week I said I was visiting my son in South Carolina, and then I said he was in North
Yeah,
Carolina.
you said he was in North Carolina.
so
but
I-
that's part of the aging process.
I was all
isn't it?
over the place. Yeah,
You were. So, reality is, I am doing a lot of talking to people, trying to pick their brains on this, because none of us is an expert on this. We're all learning, and we're all growing, and we're all looking forward to enjoying the next chapter of our life. So, we'll be back at it again next week. Obviously, Scott's not traveling next week, so we will be back next week. And I'm Rick Gorman. He's Scott Chandler, and we are off the clock.
Thanks, guys.